Hey guys, it's Thorn. It's been a while. I just got home from an exciting day of educating the future of America, which is great. It's what I do every day. I come home and my hair is always like rats nest in it. Okay, and I just don't care because I'm tired. So this is me post work. It's exciting. This would be inappropriate for work right now. Okay. I wanted to say hi, and I also wanted to talk about something that somebody brought up in a comment. I was asked to talk a little bit about online covens, and that's not something I think I've ever talked about. So I thought, yes, this would be an excellent way to make a video and check in and say hi and say something that might be interesting or useful to some of you. So this is kind of a funny subject because online covens are one of those, that's kind of one of those trigger phrases. Like, you toss that around online and people flip out, right? Like, it's everywhere. There's this idea of, well, you can't find a coven, so well, we have a coven online, or I'm looking for some other kids for an online coven or something, right? Like when AOL chat rooms and AOL homepages were a thing, AOL groups, for those of you who were around in the late 90s, or early 2000s too. AOL had this thing where you could have these groups, and it was basically like AIM and IMing, where you'd have these rooms and you could invite specific people into your rooms. Okay, but it was new and shiny because it was the 90s. And man, in high school, trying to find other Wiccans, right, other teen witches, about the only thing you could do if you weren't living in some of those rare communities where you actually had open events. And DC was not one of these communities at the time, so I was out of luck. You would get online and you would try to find an online coven or an online study group. And this usually went very poorly. Usually what would happen was you'd start a chat room or a group or something, and you would just kind of generally post on AOL looking for other kids who were about the same age, and you'd get a half dozen people who were like, oh yeah, that's a great idea, I'm so in, LOL, whatever. I'm not sure LOL was a thing then. Anyway, and then nobody would show up. You wouldn't get any kind of conversation. It would be you by yourself, right? Just like group work in school, right? When you're in school and you have to do a group project, and it's really one person who does the work, and everybody knows that just one person does the work, but we all have to pretend that it's a group effort. That's exactly how AOL groups worked, and that's actually generally how all groups work, right? Whether it's a coven or an online coven or like a planning committee or whatever initiative is happening in work or whatever, right? Whenever there's a group activity, let's be real, it's one person who does everything, and then a bunch of assholes who are just along for the ride. Okay. So that's what happened to me. You'd meet a lot of people who were really enthusiastic, and then nothing would ever come of it. So I spent a lot of time thinking that the idea of an online coven was just a joke. It was just, a bunch of lonely people who couldn't find anyone in real life, trying to make something happen on the internet because that's the best that they could do, that's the best they could hope for, and then it just would fizzle out because nobody really wants to do any work or put forth any effort. So that's the attitude that I was running with for the rest of high school and then into college. And every now and then you'd encounter the argument that, well, I'm just really introverted and I don't like people, but I want to interact in a coven setting, so online covens is really about all I can handle. And okay, I guess, right? But you still kind of run into the same things. So then I got older, and when I was actually in physical covens, and especially once I was training with a Gardnerian group and actually regularly interacting with an active working coven, okay, and that experience really just, it's really, you really can't replicate it in a lot of ways. I mean, it's the difference between training with a sports team, going out and actually running around on a field, versus maybe playing fantasy football or something like that. Like maybe I'm not saying it's not valuable and not fun, but it's just not the same experience as getting sweaty out in the grass somewhere. Okay, that's kind of again how I sort of evolved and how I was thinking about it. And again, like you'd get into online spaces where on Witchvox or Facebook or wherever, and you'd always meet people who would talk about their online covens or wanting to start online covens because there was nobody local. And, you know, it was always just really easy to be dismissive and, you know, well, that's not the same experience. You're not actually in ritual space. You're not actually blah, blah, blah. Like it's really easy to be self-righteous about that kind of thing, especially when you're actually lucky enough to be in a working coven. You know, it's much easier to look down on other people when you have everything that you want, isn't it? So that's kind of where I was operating from and where I know a lot of people operate from. Okay. Recently, I'd say in the last like year or two, I've really kind of rethought that position for a number of reasons. Partially, the more time I spend on the internet, the more value I place on my internet relationships. Okay. I wanna avoid having to compare real life relationships with internet relationships because the assumption there is that the internet is somehow separate from real life. And I really reject that kind of dichotomy. I think that our online interactions can be just as significant. And I don't know that it's fair to make the comparison, okay? The kind of experiences that I have online and the value that I place on those online experiences necessarily can't be identical to your experiences online and your online relationships. So for me to come out and say that an online relationship isn't as significant as a real life relationship, I just think isn't, like there's no way to quantify that or measure, like there's no way to actually prove that kind of statement, right? Like I'm saying something sweeping as though it were equally true for everybody, and that just never really works when people do that. So that's what I want to avoid in this video. What's ended up happening is, so I'm running a group now. I've been on the internet for a long time. I'm on the internet kind of more and more as I do the blogging and the YouTube thing, and as I'm writing more and traveling more and meeting more people and whatever, there's more and more cause to be online. And those have become really significant. And in running a group, I've also got people who are working with Foxfire now who are coming across distance, okay? When Foxfire first started, our people were all local, right? And it's really easy to meet all the time and have this happy working coven when everybody's 20 minutes away or 40 minutes away. Like that's really easy when everybody is able to use public transportation or they've got their own car and they only have to get in it for 15 minutes. Like, yeah, of course things run smoothly and scheduling works out. But when people are in other towns or sometimes other states, or schedules are wonky or whatever, I found that it's worthwhile to explore alternatives to having people in your living room. If I don't have the opportunity to interact with somebody every week face to face, well, I can still build on that relationship with a telephone or with Skype or whatever. So I'm doing that more and more as a group leader. And just with my own work schedule, I've been really busy lately. I'm teaching full time, but I'm also in school, and I've got a writing project that I'm working on, and I'm still doing traveling, and I've got fencing, and I've got just my normal human social stuff that keeps me from being crazy, right? So just increasingly busy, and I don't get to have, full-blown ritual every week or whenever I want, the way I could have before I was teaching. So I'm having to be a little bit smarter about my time and a little bit more creative with how I sort of build on things spiritually. And one of the ways that Foxfire has done that is we've started doing some of our magical work through Skype. Okay. We have, and I've done this with other people in the past too, doing things like pathworking and like meditation through Skype Okay, I was really, really skeptical of this when I first tried it. Okay, but actually, something like guided meditation is totally something that you can do through the internet. Okay, people do it with audio recordings. You listening to my voice across the internet, really, that's not any different. And the added bonus of doing it through Skype is that afterwards we can have a conversation. Okay, we've shifted a lot of our conversation to Skype and to the internet when we can't get everybody in the same room. Okay, and this has been supplementary, obviously, to having a real life coven. But in doing those things, it's really made me reconsider what you can accomplish with the internet. So as far as online covens go, having that face-to-face experience of a tight-knit coven, I think, is invaluable. I don't know. I'm not like flying my flag in the camp that says that they're necessarily the same thing or equal, or that I would trade one for the other. Okay. But, I think that with the right combination of people doing things diligently and sincerely, I don't see any reason why you couldn't build those kinds of strong relationships and magical partnerships. Like, there are certain things that you can practice together, online or by distance. People were learning Wicca and other kinds of witchcraft across distances. The correspondence course is like the oldest thing ever. Like, we've been doing this for decades. People have been writing away to learn about magical orders or secret societies, right? BOTA and people writing to Long Island to try to talk to the Bucklands, and, writing away to Gardner, like whatever. People have been acquiring information across distance for as long as there have been occultists. And I don't think that we should be dismissive of people who still have to do that or choose to do that. So I'm reevaluating my position. Okay. That said, I think it's important to distinguish, and this is its own video and not something that I'll totally get into here, but there's a difference between like an open group, like a group that just hangs out, and then a coven. Like, a coven to me has a certain level of commitment and sincerity that goes beyond just socializing or just casual kind of practice. I think there's a commitment there that's important. Okay, so when people talk about online covens, I think a lot of the time they're not talking about the same kind of organization that I'm talking about when I talk about Foxfire or when other people talk about their covens. But that doesn't preclude the possibility of people still building something that's equally significant in my mind. Now, do I believe that the Gardnerian tradition can be taught that way? Like, no, not really. Okay. But, I think people come up with things and people work with what they have. And I think if the choice is doing something differently or doing something like approximating something, having an online coven or trying to work magic in a ritual setting with people online, if the choice is doing that or not doing anything at all, I think the best choice is always to just do the modified thing. Okay, if I have to choose between practicing witchcraft in perfect circumstances under ideal conditions or not practicing witchcraft at all, right? Like, that's a crappy choice. I'm going to go for a middle ground if neither one of those things is available. If I can't have the perfect version of the thing, I'm still going to do the thing as best I can. I'm not going to not do it at all. And I don't advocate sitting around and just doing nothing just because the perfect coven isn't down the road. Okay. So if you can build something online, if an online coven is available to you and it's something that feeds you and helps you to develop, then I'm on board with that. Okay. Do I necessarily think you should be invited to, the super secret, like, traditional witch gathering? I don't know. Okay. Right. Like, I don't think that it's fair to make the comparison between those kinds of groups and meat space groups. All right. But yeah, I think people do what they can. And I think that we miss something when we're dismissive of the possibility that the internet allows for. So those are kind of my thoughts on that. It's evolved, right, from just being totally flippant and dismissive to actually incorporating some of these strategies in my own group. So anyway, thoughts on that. And just to end, I think the same kind of rules apply when you're searching for a meat space coven. I really like the word meat space. Versus something that's online, the same kinds of like safety precautions apply. I mean, you're still talking about you still want to find people that you can trust. You still want to find people who you feel safe with. Generally speaking, it's a bad idea to give people your credit card number and that sort of thing. Okay, I don't advocate for paying for that kind of thing. Right? Again, that's its own video. But yeah, thoughts on that. So use your brains. Do what you can, and I think there's something to be said for trying things, especially when other options aren't available. So, yes. Hope everybody's good. I'm good. Oliver is good. Are we good? We are. Oh, see, I was in your lap, and now you're picking me up. Bye, guys.